What's for dinner?
Welcome back to another episode of Chef Z Cooks. Today we are cooking up some seriously good food. We are making Cuban style papa rellena, and let me tell you a little bit about this dish. These are essentially Cuban style potato croquettes. So imagine some mashed potato balls stuffed with tasty and perfectly seasoned picadillo and then deep fried so that you get these little crispy edges. Oh my goodness, you guys have no idea just how delicious this is. In fact, my sister can eat this whole entire thing and not leave not one papa rellena for anyone. Now, they're actually pretty simple to make, and you can actually make them ahead of time and serve them as little appetizers, although if they're as big as the ones that I've made here, they're almost like little mini meals. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started.
Making papa rellena is honestly one of my favorite things to do because my sister loves it so much, and you'd be surprised just how simple these ingredients are. Now, to kick things off, we're actually going to season our ground beef, and I personally like to use grass-fed ground beef that's a little bit on the leaner side because remember, this is going to be a filling, so we don't want it to be too greasy. Now, to season our ground beef, I did add some Dominican oregano, some cumin, some Sazón con Achiote, and some kosher salt along with black pepper. But you can definitely use your favorite seasoning salt if that's what you have on hand. And bonus, if you have some homemade sofrito lying around the house, feel free to add that in as well. I'm actually going to add in sofrito later on, but mine is actually frozen because I made some ahead. So in case you do the frozen cube method, this will be a fun one for you. We're now going to start cooking our ground beef. So over medium-high heat in a skillet with deep size, we're going to add some olive oil and we're going to brown the meat. Now, if you are an OG subscriber and watcher of my videos, then you know that I am very picky when it comes to cooking carne molida or picadillo, which are essentially the same thing. And here's what I mean by that. I really, and I mean really, do not like chewy ground beef. So what I like to do is as soon as I start to brown the meat, I actually start to break up those chunks, and you can do that with a wooden spatula or a meat masher. And then I actually like to add some water and stew it for about 20 to 30 minutes. Now what this does is pretty much it gives you the most velvety, smooth ground beef that you've ever had, and definitely try this trick. And next up we have my frozen sofrito, which I made ahead, and this is a great way to preserve your sofrito to make sure that it lasts a super long time. I'll link the video down below where I actually walk you guys along on how I like to make it, and in case you're interested in these ice cube trays, I'll also link that in my Amazon store. So I just went ahead and I added 2 cubes of the sofrito, which each cube is roughly about a tablespoon. And then to that, I'm gonna add some fresh onions along with some fresh green and red bell peppers, but either or will do. And of course, you guys know I absolutely love garlic, so we're gonna add a healthy serving of garlic. Now the sofrito is jam-packed with flavor, and you definitely want your filling to taste as good as it can. And I also just like to see those fresh onions and peppers, so I like to add a little bit more. And again, we do not like any kind of chewy ground beef in this house. I'm gonna go ahead and just add a little bit more water until it's that nice consistency that I like. And then to that, we're now going to add some tomato paste, but you can definitely use some tomato sauce. Really what you want is that you actually want your meat to be a little bit on the drier end, but still kind of saucy because we don't want the sauce to ooze out of our papa rellena. So once that tomato paste is nice and worked in, we're gonna let that cook for another 5 minutes, and then we're gonna set that off to the side. And now we're going to cook our potatoes, and I use just regular russet potatoes, and it's really important that you add a good amount of salt when you are actually boiling the potatoes because this is going to give it so much flavor. So after about 20-30 minutes, when they're nice and smooth, just take it off, and now on to the fun part. So here we have a potato masher, which is honestly one of my favorite small kitchen appliances, or kitchen tools technically. And what this does is that it's going to give you the smoothest mashed potato ever. And the reason for that is because when you're making this dish, you actually don't want any clumps because we're actually going to be making a dough with the mashed potato. Now this is a tool that really comes in handy if you're ever interested in making gnocchi as well, which essentially is also a potato-like dough. Now if you have kids around the house, feel free to include them in on this because it's a fun tool to use. Afterwards, we're going to add some butter and we're just going to very gently just work that into the mashed potato. And as you can see, it is super smooth. Of course, we want to season it ever so slightly, so we're going to add some kosher salt along with some black pepper, and garlic powder is also optional. Now, I've added so much garlic to the ground beef that I really don't think it needs it, but to each their own. We're now going to add some cornstarch. Yes, you heard that correctly. We're going to add some cornstarch because this is going to give our potato dough a little bit of rigidity and it's going to really help it come together. Now, it's also going to thicken it, and it's a little bit of a workout. So just like you see right here, you might work up a little bit of a sweat, but that's totally fine. It's definitely worth it. You just want to work in the dough as best as you can. And then we're going to set that off to the side. And now we're actually going to start building our papa rellena. Now for this, I do like to use gloves because it just helps everything go about very smoothly. So with the spoon, I just take a nice spoonful and then I just flatten it out into like a little disc, and I make a little indentation in the center, and then I take about roughly a tablespoon of the cooked meat, and then very gently we just want to close it up and form it into a ball. Now you do want to repeat this step, of course, until you have made all of your potato balls that have been filled with this Cuban delight. Now keep in mind that you can make the papa rellena as big or as little as you like. I am a little bit exaggerated, so I'm not gonna lie, I have a really hard time making them kind of small, so mine always come out big. And you can form la papa rellena a multiple ways and a variety of different ways. So like you see here, you can make the indentations using your finger or using the spoon, and of course you can add as much or as little filling. Bonus, you can even add cheese to your filling if that's what you're into. I personally like them a little bit more on the traditional side, so just plain old deliciously perfectly good picadillo is fine with me. And once you formed all of the papa rellena, we just want to set them aside onto a baking sheet, because then afterwards we're actually going to create the coating. Again, if you have any little ones at home who are really into building things, this might be a fun recipe to include your kids or even your family members, because you can create a little bit of an assembly line. And now for the coating, super simple. We're going to take 2 eggs, and again, I like to use some free range natural eggs, and you want to make sure not to include any of the shells and avert a crisis. We're going to scramble that together, and then we're going to take our papas, and you just want to reform them just in case they flattened out while they were sitting. You want to dip them into some all-purpose flour. There's no need to actually season the flour like you may do perhaps when you're frying chicken, because again, this is already filled with so much flavor. So after you dip it in the flour, we're now going to dip it in the egg, and you want to be super careful. Feel free to get your hands dirty if you like. I always say the best is to dirty one hand and then keep the other one nice and clean, just to keep everything nice and organized. After you've dipped it into the egg, we're actually going to dip it into some plain breadcrumbs. Again, I like to use plain breadcrumbs because I don't want to distract from all of the goodness that's going on inside. But if you do want to use some Italian seasoned one, feel free and do so. And then afterwards, you just want to very gently just reform it and just make sure that everything is evenly coated, just like you see right here. Now bonus, you can actually refrigerate these and then fry them and cook them when you're ready. But because we're ready right now, let's go ahead and fry these babies up. Now I am using a cast iron Dutch oven, and once that oil reaches roughly about 350 degrees, you just want to very carefully submerge it into the oil. Now at most, I will fry 3 at a time, because remember, you don't want the oil to get too cool. And as soon as it takes on this nice golden color, which for me only took about 2 minutes, you just want to take them out and then place them onto a napkin so that excess oil drains. And there you guys have it, the perfect, tastiest papa rellena. Feel free to cut right into it and enjoy with your favorite sauce, whether that's the mojo sauce, ketchup, or even hot sauce. Until next time, I'm Chef Z y buen provecho.